Today we're going to be looking at how devices communicate. Devices communicate using something called standards, and they also use something called protocols. We're going to be looking at protocols next time, so don't worry too much about that one. So the reason devices communicate is so they can transmit data over a network. But let's have a look how they actually do that. A network standard is an agreement about the hardware and software which is going to be communicating and sending the data to each other. So a really common one that people have heard of, an Ethernet cable, but then there's also an Ethernet protocol as well for communication. And by having these standards, it just helps manufacturers to create products and software so they're compatible with other manufacturers so they can develop their own product, but then this is the standard that they will all use so they can still communicate with each other. Some really common ones include, like on your web browsers, where they agree that they'll use HTTP to communicate, or HTML. Now, if devices are on the same network as each other, there's a way that they can communicate with each other, and this is by using a unique address. If they're on the same network, they'll use something called a MAC address. Now, it's important we understand what a MAC address is, what it looks like, and the properties of a MAC address, so here it is. So a MAC address has 12 characters. The MAC address is unique to every device and it can't be changed. A MAC address is in hexadecimal, so if we look back at our data representation unit, we can see what hexadecimal looks like. And if we think about our network hardware, we discussed what a network switch was, and that is what will use the MAC address to be able to send the data to the right place. If the device is on a different network, it won't use a MAC address. It will use a different type of address, one that you probably heard of called an IP address. Now, IP stands for Internet Protocol. So if you remember what IP stands for, you'll probably remember that you would use that one to communicate over the internet. Now, there are two versions of IP address. There's IP version 4 and then there's IP version 6. So IP addresses can be reused, they can be changed, and can be automatically allocated when you're using the internet. They've started to use IP version 6, which is almost limitless in the amount of combinations of types of address that are available, so they can start assigning it to all the devices that are using the internet. An IP address will need to be allocated before that device can actually use the network. So we've got some practice questions to finish on, just on that short topic. Question number 1 is, what is a MAC address used for? Question number 2 is, explain what is meant by a network standard. Question number 2, how many bits is in IP version 6? And finally, explain how devices on a star network make use of a MAC address. Okay, let's run through the answers then. So question number 1, what is a MAC address used for? It is used for communications between devices on a same network. Question number 2, explain what is meant by a network standard. Standards allow manufacturers to create products and software that are compatible from other manufacturers. Question number 3, how many bits are in IP version 6? 128 bits. And finally, explain how devices on a star network make use of a MAC address. An answer you could have given is something like, when a device sends information to another device within the same network, a network switch will use the unique MAC address of the device to ensure that data reaches the correct device.